I didn't mean to say that or whatever.
Oh.
You tell me.
Well, alrighty. My name is James Lynn West, named almost after my father, but not quite. For some reason, they wanted to have a son with a similar name but not identical name. So rather than being James Lawrence West Jr., I'm James Lynn West, which means we had two James L. West in the family who are not the same person, and one was not a senior and one was not a junior, and it's caused endless confusion over the years. I was born on the second anniversary of D-Day, June 6, 1946. I was absolutely a boomer baby, conceived right after the armistice and peace treaties were all served at the end of World War II. My father's family, came from South Carolina in the late 1840s. There was a mass migration of Associate Reformed Presbyterians who were looking to find a new place to live in the West. And for reasons unknown, they all came and settled in this part of the country. Some of them settled around Mound City and Hopewell Church, some around Ebenezer Church, where Bryce's Crossroads is. Bethany, and then Ebenezer, which is up around Cotton Plant. So my family's been here since then, mostly in farming. My father was the first one, I think, to leave the farming part of the life. And he moved into town, and he started working at a grocery store in town as a butcher and a grocery store salesman. At one of the downtown stores, he worked with a Mr. Jameson, who had a store for a long time. And then eventually, he sold the business to my father and to Werner Medlin, who is Bill Kitchen's grandfather. And they were partners for a little while. And then Daddy bought out Mr. Medlin and had the grocery store from the early 50s through about 1972, when he closed it because his health was getting worse. And also, this is when stores, particularly grocery stores, were starting to become larger, and downtown was kind of dying a little bit. All the stores were moving out to the shopping centers. This was for Walmart, of course, but all of that was changing. I was born in Memphis rather than New Albany, and nobody's ever told me why. I have no idea why I was born in Memphis, but I was born at Baptist Hospital, but the family was all here. I have one sister named Penny, who is married, and they live outside Aberdeen. She worked at the hospital in Tupelo for many, many, many years, and she also worked at the Presbyterian Church there. Her husband is retired, but he has 3 different jobs. He works for the FAA to certify planes for airworthiness. He works for the drone program at Mississippi State University, and he works for whatever American Eurocopter used to be now. So he's retired, but he has 3 jobs, and he makes a lot more money than I do. Let's see. Went to school at Central Elementary School, which of course no longer exists, and if you've seen Catherine Dye's paintings of the old school, this is where the middle school is now. It was a series of 3 buildings. The elementary school was on the left, the auditorium was in the middle, the junior high school and high school were on the right. So we went there through the 10th grade, I guess, and that's when W.P. Daniel was built. So I graduated from W.P. Daniel High School in 1964. I think we were the second class, I believe, who graduated from that. And of course, it was much smaller school then than it is now in terms of vocational center and football field and so forth. I was a pretty decent student. I didn't have to study as much as I should have, which came back to bite me in college days. Ran around with a bunch of buddies. We should have gotten in trouble way more than we did. We did stupid things a lot. Back in those days, people liked to listen to the radio, but the only radio you could listen to was on AM. And people liked to listen to WLS in Chicago. WLS standing for World's Largest Store, because the store owned the radio station. There was a guy named Dick Biondi, and that was the goal of everybody around, to get their names mentioned on Dick Biondi's radio show. So we decided, what can we do? What can we do? For reasons unknown, we decided we would try to create the world's largest rubber band chain. So we got boxes of rubber bands, and we looped them together, and we went to the main hall of New Albany High School right after school and started stretching this chain of rubber bands from the south end of the building to the north end of the building. We got it stretched all the way there about the time the principal came out and wanted to know what in the world was going on, seeing this rubber band chain, which was kind of bouncing up and down in the hall. So the guy at the north end panicked, let go of the chain. It sounded like a 747 coming down the hall. In the middle of the hall was this aged black man named Albie Little, who was the janitor, who always pushed this big, huge cardboard box around the toilet paper came in. And that was kind of his workstation. Unfortunately, well, it didn't hit him, but it hit the box, made a big boom. I swear Albie jumped 3 or 4 feet in the air, but was unharmed. We were called into the office, severely chastised, but not expelled. And that was kind of the height of our academic achievements, I guess, during our years at high school. But I digress. Let's see what else. I was an amateur magician, so I did some magic shows for years, a few years around like Tupelo, New Albany, Holly Springs for city clubs. And, I wasn't all that great, but I wasn't all that bad. It was a lot of fun. I sometimes miss doing it, but it's changed a lot, and that was a long time ago. I was interested in electronics, so I took apart old TVs and rebuilt them and built various things that worked. This was still in the days of tubes and discrete components rather than integrated circuits and transistors and such. So as electronics progressed over the years and got more compact, more complicated, I kind of lost track of that as much as I used to do, but I enjoyed doing that a lot. As far as journalism is concerned, I did write some for the Maroon and White in junior high school and later on in high school, and was the co-editor of the Maroon and White then, and I don't think they still have the paper now. I don't know if they do or not. They did for a while. In those days, the Gazette was still located down on Railroad Avenue, and this, I think the building's empty now. But the newspaper was printed on a flatbed press using hot metal type and something called a linotype. And if you've never seen a linotype in operation, it is a fascinating Victorian device. Huge, gigantic cast iron thing with gears and cams and metal parts dropping down and melted lead in a vat and all of this stuff. And I won't get into how complicated it is. There's a documentary on Netflix, I think, one of the streaming channels about how they work, shows them. But we would go down there after school and watch them set the hot metal type in this machine for the Maroon and White and then print it. The flatbed press was a flat bed. All of these pieces of metal type were locked together in a big case the size of 2 newspaper pages. And you would take it and set it down on the press. The press would take this shades thing and run it under an ink roller, bring it back out. You would then put a big single piece of paper on it and roll it back under the pressure roller, which would then print the ink on the paper, come back out, take it back off. You had 2 pages of the paper. That's all you had. So to do the whole Gazette or the Maroon and White or anything else, you had to do page by page by page by page and put them all together. One flaw or one problem to watch out for was you had hundreds or even thousands of pieces of metal type in this chase, and if it wasn't tightened enough when you were carrying it to the press, it could all fall out on the floor, which it did one day, and of course took hours to reassemble. So that was that part of that. I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer until I discovered being away from home. Then I ran amok, as some people do. I went to Mississippi State, started out in engineering, decided calculus was not exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Got involved with a bunch of young radicals at the school. By young radicals, they were the people who did the Reflector, which was the newspaper there. So I, for some reason, quickly got ingrained into the staff at the Reflector and became the associate editor fairly quickly for that paper, and had a lot of fun and met a lot of weird people and missed a lot of classes and mostly avoided getting into trouble. So the electronics and electrical engineering part of the curriculum kind of fell by the wayside, and I got more involved in that part of the school, and that was going very well. But I was missing so many classes, they decided I might be better off elsewhere at some point. So I won't say I left entirely in disgrace. I am proud of one thing. The Vice President of Academic Affairs gave me a personal letter of recommendation when I left, which I thought was very nice. Dr. John Bettersworth. I will always remember that man. So I decided maybe I better try to buckle down and all of that. So I went to Northeast to kind of just get myself together briefly, and then went to Lambeth College, which is up in Jackson, Tennessee, and it was a Methodist endowed, very small liberal arts university, college and later university. Only about 600 students, beautiful campus, looked like an Ivy League school almost. Very high professor to teacher ratio, and I did pretty well there. And was doing English and doing a little bit of journalism there. But then I fell in with another bad crowd, which was a theater crowd. And for some reason, I fit in very well with the theater crowd. I had skills that were good for building sets and for designing sets, and I had a little bit of acting ability and a little bit of directing ability. And so within 2 years there, I had added that to my English major. I won several awards for set design and acting and directing and things like that. And thought, well, this is pretty good. And something that kind of turned me around for theater was about that time something called Hair came out. It received a lot of publicity. It was this, new rock musical, and everybody got nude on stage at one point, and it was, a really big deal in New York and got a lot of national publicity. For reasons unknown, Memphis State got the rights to do the only non-professional production of Hair in the world. And they did, and I went to see it. There was no nudity, of course. But I'd never seen anything like that. The energy, the creativity, the audience involvement, it changed my life entirely. It was so involving. And I later went and saw the New York production, which wasn't nearly as good as the Memphis State production was. So I decided maybe this is what I wanted to do for a while. For a senior project, I got carried away. I took an obscure Tennessee Williams play that's not very good and nobody understands, called Camino Real. But I involved multimedia, rear projection, extensive soundtracks, theater in the round, just went nuts, and was told it was the best senior project they had ever seen at Lambeth College. And I wrote a letter to Memphis State saying, hey, I might like to be a graduate assistant. And then they later on sent me a telegram saying, yeah, okay. So I was a graduate teaching assistant at Memphis State, which I thought was my dream school. That went pretty well. I'm not sure whether this was deliberate on their part or not, but they were trying to fit me into their academic structure, and I didn't want to fit in with their academic structure, so we kind of butted heads over that, and I don't think I accomplished as much as I could have there. But still, I enjoyed it. It was a good time. The only bad part was all the graduate teaching assistants had to teach the principles of public speaking at 8 o'clock in the morning to a bunch of football players who didn't want to be there and didn't care. And it was the dullest textbook I have ever seen in my life for any subject. It was just, but everybody had to do it. While this is going on, if I haven't lost you by now, I was also in contact with my old professor from Lambeth College. His name was Reed Gilbert. And Reed Gilbert was a Fulbright scholar. He had studied mime in France with the man who taught Marcel Marceau mime. He had studied dance in the Far East and in Asian theater and movement and a lot of things like that. He was also a Methodist minister. He has some connections in southern or southwestern Wisconsin with theater up there. And he had access to some property that was a farm that had been redesigned by one of Frank Lloyd Wright's students, early students. And they also had an old opera house in this small town called Spring Green, which was the home of Frank Lloyd Wright, where they were renovating this theater for use for the public. His idea was to have a summer theater program that would become a full-fledged theater and mime school with internships, performing classes, workshops, all sorts of things. And he thought I might be good for that, and it sounded like a pretty good idea too at the time, to go to the wilds of Wisconsin and get involved in all of this. So that started with summer during graduate school, and then carried on after I graduated from school. But this was in Spring Green, outside Spring Green, and it was called the Valley Studio, and internally it was called the Wisconsin Mime Company. And we were primarily a mime company, and this was when mime was a big thing. Not anymore, but it was then for a while. So we did workshops and performances around Wisconsin. We did a tiny bit of educational television, but mostly in schools and theaters. We also had students come in for internships, and they would stay 6 months or a year and study and perform. And we would have people come in with like various theater dance movements and exercise programs and just all sorts of things. We had, for a while, we had a troupe of Chinese skin puppeteers. And what they did was they took dried skin, cut it, painted it, but made it translucent. And so that you would do this behind a screen, backlit. You take the skin puppets, when you put them up to the screen, they would become visible out front. When you pulled them away, they didn't. They were articulated, and it was kind of like battling demons and dragons and so forth. Nobody spoke English. They all spoke Chinese. We somehow managed to communicate for about 3 days, and it worked just fine, and they went on their way. We had some other things like that went on. We had kids from all over the country. I think the most noteworthy student we had was Lee Marvin's daughter, Courtney. She was one of our interns. And it was kind of weird to hear her talking, you know, somebody would argue about, at the time, All in the Family being on, well, is Archie Bunker a racist, or is he not a racist, or whatever. Well, she says, well, you know, I've known Carol all my life. At least I think, you know, that's kind of weird to hear people talking about their Hollywood friends, but she was very, very nice. Valley Studio rocked on for several years, and then it sort of began changing and sort of began disintegrating to a degree. Mine was just becoming out of vogue. Tastes were changing, and I think I started having some health problems too. But it was interesting. One thing that I think about a lot was Spring Green is about 45 minutes away from Madison. And of course, Madison was the state capital. 40,000 students, pretty liberal school, a lot of political activity. There was a lot of street theater back in those days. And so we would go to Madison and do street theater sometimes of various types. We would do improvisation and, you know, all sorts of stuff. We did a little bit of everything. And there was these 3 guys that lived in the suburbs of Madison, and they had their own little comedy troupe, and they did street theater. And we kind of battled for turf occasionally for a while, and gradually went on to do other things. They went on to do other things. They had more success than I did. They were at Kentucky Fried Theater, and they're the ones who went on to do all of the airplane movies and all of these other Hollywood things with, you know, what's his name? I can't think of the guy's name, the comedian, the kind of dramatic actor. Anyway, they've had very successful careers. But if you look at their movies, and almost every one of their movies, no matter what, there is a mime in that movie who gets killed, abused, or somehow beaten up, which I suspect may have some connection to our days back then in Madison on the streets. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What does that have to do with journalism? Nothing. Nothing at all. But anyway, the bottom is falling out of the mime market. So also I was starting to have some health problems. So I said, okay, go back home. You know, all else fails, go back home. And I did. And I was kind of halfway looking for a job. Not real hard, but sort of. And just stopped by to see Bill Rutledge, asking if he knew of anything. He said, well, no, not right now, I guess. But, you know, till you find something, if you want to, just help us out. I said, okay, that's as official as it ever got. That's okay, I'll help y'all out. So I started working at the Gazette, And at the time, I was doing pastel composition, and then he knew I could write, so I gradually started writing more and more and more and more, and it turned into more of an editorial or journalism writing thing instead of the composition and art part of it. Of course, then it was offset printing, so we weren't doing the flatbed press anymore, so we're a little more up to date than that, but we couldn't do color printing. Color printing didn't come along for a long time. Of course, we were still using film rather than electronic video, so we had to do all the darkroom work, which was a lot of trouble, but also a lot of fun to do. I wish I still could do that sometimes, occasionally. It's kind of messy to do. The biggest problem with the photography part was when you had a football game and it ran late and you had to go straight to the darkroom at like 10 or 10:30 at night and do a bunch of film processing and printing right then, so you had it ready. But that was really just the worst part. Of course, the paper's changed a lot. Bill sold it to Landmark Communications about a year after I'd come back to New Albany. And they were a company based in Norfolk, Virginia, a big company. They owned a lot of big newspapers, a lot of property, a lot of community newspapers scattered around the country. We were the only thing in this area that they owned, and they really didn't care much about us. Nobody wanted to come down here. It didn't matter if you drove, flew, hopped, whatever. It was going to take you 6 hours to get here, and nothing else was close. So we didn't get a lot of attention from Landmark. And because of that, too, our publishers would last about a year and a half and then be gone. So from 1978 till the Journal bought the paper, we had super turnover in the staff and administration. It probably hurt the paper some because it was inconsistent. Everybody had so many different philosophies and preferences and how the paper should go. And I think people were kind of confused by the schizophrenia of it. But it did grow, and we did do better, I think, for a while. But then we got an editor who was behaving strangely. Or not an editor, I'm sorry, a publisher. He was behaving strangely. He would do things like promote people one day, demote them the next day, change their job the next day. He thought people were not being honest with him. He had a voice stress analyzer on his desk. He literally had an electronic device that was supposed to identify whether people were lying to him. And he kept a little notebook of tells. He said, "Lynn, you're lying to me." "Well, how do you know?" "Well, you raised your eyebrows. You always raise your eyebrows when you lie." "Well, I don't think I do," but that was in the book. He couldn't keep up with what we were doing enough to suit him, so he had all the doors removed from the building and taken to the landfill. So there were no doors to the building at all. This eventually became stressful. And so I retired. I finally said, "Oh, I'm here, I'm done, I'm retiring." At the same time this was going on, he had been concerned about lack of single copy sales of the newspaper. And he'd come back, done a study, and he looked at a bunch of newspapers, front pages, and looked at the retail sale or the rack sales for each of those weeks. Well, not surprisingly, if the paper had a crime story, a disaster story, a scandal story on the top of the front page, it sold more. So the light bulb went off for him, and he decreed that every issue of the paper would have either crime, disaster, whatever on the top of the front page. Sure enough, it sold more single copies. The side effect was that people got sick of the paper. It made New Albany look like a hellhole, and advertisers fled. People were not happy with that. After this was about 6 months or so after I had retired, and people kept saying, "Why don't you start a newspaper?" Which is probably a really bad idea, but we said, "Okay, let's do that." So me and Jerry Shiverdecker, who was a former publisher of the Gazette and had a pretty strong newspaper background in other parts of the country, Gene Ashcraft and Kim Serber, got together. We put together a plan. We invited about 40 people to a meeting at the library. We made our presentation. We said, will y'all loan us $1,000 each, and this is what we want to do? 39 people gave us their money and said, "Go for it, we're behind you." So we started the New Albany News Exchange, which was at first intended to be primarily an online newspaper backed up by a print newspaper, an ink-on paper. But this was about 18, 19 years ago. There weren't much internet around then. And so the online aspect of it kind of fell into second place, and we focused more on the print version. It was a tabloid paper, so it wasn't a full-size paper. It had more color in it. It was more of a user-friendly, less pretentious, more of we're going to do what you want to do kind of paper with a lot of faces in it. People liked it. We liked it. We made a profit our first year. Not a huge profit, but we made a profit our first year. And well into our second year, the Tupelo Journal made us an offer that was really too good to turn down. So with some regret, we sold it to them and kept operating it as we had been, at least for the time being. The Journal had for years and years and years wanted to buy the Gazette, as they have bought several other community newspapers in the area. And finally, for reasons we didn't know at the time, the Landmark folks decided they were willing to sell the Gazette. And they did. We learned later from the Gazette staff that they were about 6 months away from going under because of competition from the News Exchange. Who knew? So once the Journal bought the Gazette, then they decided they didn't want to keep both papers, which I kind of think was a mistake, but maybe it wasn't. So they killed the News Exchange. I was back to the Gazette again. And off and on, that's where I've been all that time. So there were a couple of hiccups, but basically I've been at the Gazette from 1978 till now, assuming I'm still alive now. So, and I've had most of the positions done. I've never done sports. Well, I did sports a little bit, but I've never been sports editor. I've done most of the other stuff except run the press over the years. And people say I'm kind of the face of the paper, and I guess I am the face of the paper. It's just because I've been around, not anything else much.
You've had a very interesting path.
Well, I cooked in an Italian restaurant for a while, and I was a soil conservation guy for a while, and fought snakes and fell in creeks. That was back between the college years too.
Tell me the name of the college in Jackson, Tennessee.
It doesn't exist anymore.
What was it called?
It was Lambeth College. It was
Lambeth.
Lambuth.
Okay.
Jackson has Lambeth College, Jackson State University, and it's got Union University, and I think there's a junior college. This little town, it's got 4 different higher education things in it. It's like Millsaps. It's Methodist endowed, primarily. Now, this was a long time ago when I was there. More recently, they started having trouble with their accreditation, and then I think they had trouble with their funding. So Memphis State sort of took over operation of it for a while and sort of integrated it into the Memphis State campus. But I think that ended, and I'm not sure what's being done with the campus now. As I say, it's not a big campus, but it's a beautiful campus north of town.
You kind of came back home around 78?
Yeah. By the time Elvis died, I died and came back too. So, the city's changed a lot, and it's going to change, I think, a lot more. I don't think the people have changed at all. I think we still have some of the good and the bad, both of small town life. I mean, the friendliness, the lack of crime, the familiarity with each other, but also there's the little internal power struggles and, protect my position that goes on, and the good old boy politics, and, it depends on who you know, who you're married to a large degree still, like any town. I think right now our mayor is trying to be progressive. I think our board of aldermen are trying to be progressive, but their tendency has long been to, well, we'll talk about it at the next meeting. And there's still an awful lot of that. There's an awful lot of that still is going on. We got Billie Jean Stroud, love her or hate her. She is a force to be reckoned with. We got Betsy Hamilton, also a force to be reckoned with. And there's so many things going on now that were never going on before. All the stuff related to the park and related to the river But we're having things like Clark Ritchie. I mean, we've got a guy making films who keeps popping up from time to time here, and he's going to keep doing things like that. I think eventually, like the walking trail, the development of the north side, there are just so many projects going on that are underway that I think are going to keep New Albany growing more and more. The trail, I think at the time people thought, the trail? Yeah, who cares? What's that going to do? And how much difference has that made? I don't think the people have changed that much, but I think the community has changed that much as a whole. Yeah, and the opportunities here. I mean, it's a good place to live. What do I see for growth in the future? I don't know. I always have wished that we would take some of the property that the city or the county owns. There's 39 acres out by the fairgrounds. It's just a pasture and woods that they're doing nothing with right now. Mississippi does not have a folk arts center like Arkansas does. It does not have a folk arts center state park. Jill has put together the makings of a folk arts center and does it every year. I don't know that that could be translated into a state park. We could be the folk arts center for the state of Mississippi and have a state park here. You know, things like that are possible. Probably never happen, but still, it's possible.
Well, let's take the trail, for instance. When that happened, like you said, everybody was like, so what? A trail. What's happened since the trail?
Well, my understanding about the trail is, of course, the mayors of Houston and Pontotoc thought it would never come to anything, that Tim Kent was the one who pushed for it, and he's the one that got it in the rail bank, I believe, totally by himself, so he deserves credit for that. Since the trail's come here, tourism, we have people I've talked to, there's a group of Ford sisters from Wisconsin that come down here once a year at least and ride the trail. People from Canada, people from Europe, people from all over. They shop here, they stay here, they eat here, and it's only growing. When you use businesses, I don't think we would have some of the couple of new restaurants that we have, perhaps, if the trail were not here. And of course, at some point, they're trying to extend the trail from here to Ripley. I don't know if that's going to happen because it's going to be so expensive, but if that does happen, it will bring even more people here because it will make it the 100-mile trail or whatever, I think, that people like to be able to do, to be able to use. They can develop the river. A lot of places have parks and have very nice parks. Not everybody has a river. We do. And that's something that's not unique, but it certainly stands out and offers a lot of opportunities. Not only have a river, we have a river and a park and a downtown, and it's all right there together. 2 parks, and it's all right there together. So it's a lot to offer. We have a strong cultural community. We have a good educational system. Again, low crime.
What are some things that you see that you feel like are the most promising, exciting potential maybe for the city? You've mentioned the river development.
Yeah.
You think that's it?
That's the big thing, I think. And the trail. I mean, the trail is already big, but it's just going to continue, I think, to grow. Yeah, I think the river. But I don't know what else. Again, we have a theater that we're not doing anything with currently. That may or may not change at some point. I would like to see it change. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. The whole area north of the railroad tracks are largely, that area is largely underdeveloped right now. I think that's a really, really good opportunity for more growth, tourism, and the city, downtown New Albany is tiny. Downtown New Albany is 1 block and 2 streets, and that's all. It's a little bitty downtown. We're landlocked or riverlocked, and then the historic part of downtown really can't grow now very well. North of the tracks is about it. You can do a little bit on Carter Avenue, but not too much now. So yeah, I see that as an opportunity to be taken as well. I mean, can redo almost all of this in this part of town.
In all of your meetings you've attended, have you ever thought about writing a fictional account of this small town?
Of course. Of course I am. Of course I am.
Do you have a name for it?
No, I don't have a name for it. I've started it, but that was a long time ago. I'll probably never finish it. No. It would be, if I were to write it, it would be quirky. I used to be a very good columnist, I think. I don't have the time or energy anymore, so I could say maybe I burned out, maybe I didn't. In my early years, I think I wrote some fairly good columns, and it maybe had the potential to be a decent writer. So if I were to write a novel, it would be kind of quirky, probably. I don't know. And I would hope humorous. Maybe not quite Confederacy of Dunces, but you know, in fact, I hope it would be better than that, actually. But you know, something like that. The one book I think I wish I'd written was Catch-22. The language. Have you read Catch-22?
A long time ago.
The language. I love the language and the way Catch-22 is written and the way it's structured. When you go in and out, that to me was the best thing I ever read. When I was a kid, I read the encyclopedia for recreation. Loved to sit there and just read through the encyclopedia and read stuff.
Did your family have the whole set of encyclopedias?
We had the World Book. I think that was maybe the economy version of the Britannica. But yeah, it was the World Book. I wish I still had it. My mother got rid of it at some point.
Where in New Albany did you grow up?
I grew up on the east side of town. The landmark we used to use was the barbecue grill, which has not existed for years and years and years. The Windshield Doctor is where the barbecue grill used to be on East Bankhead Street. And at the time, of course, it was outside of the city limits. The city limits used to end at the end of the cemetery where Highway 15 and Bankhead cross. There used to be a little sign there saying city limits in New Albany. So it was only later that we got incorporated into the city and got annexed in and got city utilities and so forth. My folks had this house built. It was a big, fairly nice white house about halfway down the hill toward the sale barn from the top of the hill. And I grew up there in that part of town. So I wasn't really a north side or a south side kid. I went to Central Elementary School, but I didn't live close to Central Elementary School. Played in the band, I didn't mention that. Started out with the drums, but they needed a saxophone, so I started playing saxophone. In high school, we had a really crappy little garage band, and we played at some events here and there. We played at some school events like the basketball games. We played mostly jazz at the basketball games, so when there was halftime or break or whatever, Freddie Fawcett and the Four Drips.
Who was in this band?
Well, Alan Jackson was in it. Doug Panel was in it. I never knew Doug or not. He died many years ago. Most of them are classmates who were not here. Beaver Johnson was the drummer, and he was a very colorful person. George Brandon played in it. Steve Livingston played in it. It changed a little bit from time to time, but that was sort of the core group mostly.
And who was Freddie Fawcett?
Oh, there was no Freddie
That
Fawcett.
was just...
That was just the name. Yeah, that was just the name.
Everybody then had some sort of garage band, didn't they?
No, there was... No, not really. The Dukes formed about that time or right after that. Of course, Ted Mack and the whole thing, they did. No, we're talking 63, 64. No, not really. I think they came later. There weren't really many electric guitars at that point. The one that I think that was played was a Sears Silvertone that he had, and it came in a case, and the case had a little amplifier built in the case. So you opened it up, set it on its edge, it wasn't very good, but it worked. So yeah, it was pretty primitive in terms of rock and roll bands. I mean, the Beatles hadn't hit yet, they were still to come at this point. And Elvis was big, but nothing else. It was still Elvis, not the Beatles. So that was before the big British invasion and revolution and so forth. Yeah.
And you played the saxophone?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. I played keyboards early on and kind of lost that skill too. I wish I had that back. I guess I could get it back. Because I've got 3 synthesizers at home I don't ever play. Well, she was originally a teacher when she met my father. My mother was a Cochran, from the Cochran family, from the Enville community in Pontotoc and Lee County. It's distantly related to Thad Cochran, very distantly, but it's kind of that branch of the family. And she went to school at Sherman, and then went to school in Oklahoma and got her teaching degree. So she met my father when she was teaching at Center School, close to Mountain City. When we were young, my sister and I, she stayed at home for a while, and then later on, she worked at the hospital in the radiology department, just as a clerk for a while. And she taught for a year or two, but mostly she would stay at home. My father was real big in the Lions Club. He was proud of that. There was a man named Delmas Hardin who owned the Fulton newspaper, and if you've ever heard of somebody named Ruby Dale Hardin, that's his daughter. She's big in Tupelo. She does the Dancing with the Stars and all that kind of stuff. My father and Delmas Hardin and Felix Black from Tupelo, his Black's department store, I think they started 12 Lions Clubs, 13 Lions Clubs in this area, so they were proud of that. They did a lot of things. And Daddy was president of the fair board, so I grew up at the county fair every year for years and years and years, and thoroughly enjoyed that. That was back when the arena was still outdoors. There wasn't any competition for entertainment then, because you had black and white TV, you had the 3 networks, but that's all you had. There was nothing else to see. Also, the fair was in September when it wasn't so hot. The weather was a lot better. So the Midway was bigger. There was less to do other than the fair, so it was very popular. All the communities had RCDCs, the Rural Community Development Committees, and they all had extensive booths representing each community, like Locust Grove and all that. I mean, it was a big, big thing. The big draw was the last 3 days of the fair, they gave away a pickup truck and 2 cars, or 2 pickups and a car. And the way this worked was merchants who wanted to participate would purchase tickets from the fair board. I don't know what they paid for them. I wish I did. And when you shop with these merchants, for every dollar you spent, you got a ticket. And then all the tickets go into the big chicken wire drum, and they draw a ticket out, and whoever is the winner gets the truck that night. Farmers would wait and they'd buy their cotton pickers right before the fair. So they had, if you know what a shirt cardboard is, they had all of their tickets stuck to these shirt cardboards, and stacks of them, all usually in sequential numbers. It's shoulder to shoulder. I remember one night in particular, I went out there, and I had to park where Bumpers is. That was as close as I could get because there were so many people there. But of course, you could win a car.
Did you have to be present to win?
Yeah. Well, the store was where Muddy Mallard more recently has been, so kind of in the middle of downtown. Ray Drug Company was on the west side, still the best Spice Tam sandwich and chocolate milkshakes on the planet. Oh, I would love to have one. Oh. And Morris Jewelry Store, Joed Morris and David Morris's parents were on the other side. Then Rogers Drug Store was next, and then what became Savington's was next, and then up on the corner was Chapman's Drug Store, and then across the street was Cat's Drug Store. So we had 4 drug stores, 3 of which had soda fountains at the time. Again, Gray's was the best. Again, Daddy had been in the grocery business for several years, and for a long time was pretty prosperous. You know, it wasn't a big store, but it had pretty much what was needed. At that time, again, smaller community, smaller town, the regular customer could pick up the phone call the grocery store, say, I need a loaf of bread. Well, if you knew who it was, you knew what kind of bread they wanted. You didn't have to tell them. They could charge the groceries, pay for it when they could. Whoever the grocery boys were, I was sometime, would put them in a basket, put them in the back of this beat up pickup truck that we used for deliveries. The thing was so beat up, the clutch didn't even work. You just shifted gears. It didn't matter whether you had the clutch in it or not, whatever. You take them to somebody's house, you go in the back door, you put the food up in the cabinets for them, the door's not locked, nobody cares, everything's fine, you know. That's just part of what you do. That's the regular service. Oh yeah, I've been in many people's houses putting up the grocery stuff. You know, they didn't lock the doors. They also had these racks full of comic books, funny books, comic books, like 2 or 3 racks full. For reasons totally unknown, they would allow kids to come in after school, get the things out of the rack, sit there and look through them for hours on end, or go get a Coke, sit at the table, and then put them back at the rack when they were through instead of buying them. But they had a soda fountain counter, and it was like black marble or something with all the fountain stuff. The fountain Cokes were great, the chocolate milkshakes were great. They made their own ice cream, I'm told. And for some reason, the spiced ham sandwiches are what stick with me, and I think it was just because the grill they used was so seasoned, and the wooden blocks they used had all of this juice something to it. I had to have my jaw wired shut one summer, and I had to live on chocolate milkshakes with sustagen food supplement mixed in with it, and then the soup run through a blender for about 6 weeks. And I never got tired of those milkshakes. I never ever got tired of those milkshakes. They were so good. This was at a point when I assumed I was going to go to the grave as a bachelor. I mean, that's the way it was going to be. You know, I was never somebody. I was very shy. Didn't date a lot. I didn't date really almost all, none at all. And that was just the way it was. And then one night before Thanksgiving, I went to a friend's house for sort of a pre-Thanksgiving little celebration, and she worked at the radio station here in New Albany at that time, and they had brought in a new disc jockey from Meridian, and this new disc jockey's name was Elizabeth Boyd, except on the radio she was known as Lisa Landau. And she was very popular in Meridian, but decided she wanted to change, so she came up here. And it's one of these little rom-com stories, I guess. I met her that night and was just totally smitten, totally. And I think she kind of liked me too. And ended up like, you know, I don't dance, but that night I danced. And I danced with her standing on my cowboy boots. Why I was wearing cowboy boots, I have no idea about that. That's, who knows, that's some sort of brain collapse or something. And by the way, she was 14 years younger than I was. So that was a little bit weird for most other people, but until lately, I don't think I've been my age. I think I've been considerably younger than my age. It's catching up with me, but for the most part, I've been considerably younger than my age. So this went on for several months and just got better and better and stronger. It was a little bit weird because this was back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, the newspaper was the primary source of information in Union County. Since I was writing a column regularly then, all of Union County knew about my courtship. Almost every week I'd write about meeting the in-laws. Oh Lord. And just various steps, and you know, we finally got engaged, decided to get married, and went through all of that. It was a little bit weird because, well, not weird, that's kind of fun, because in those days I was something of a celebrity. Everybody knew me, everybody read the paper, my picture was in the paper a lot, I wrote a lot. She went from the radio station here to KZ 103. She was the most popular radio personality and music director in North Mississippi for quite a few years. Everybody knew who she was. She did a lot of remotes. So we were like kind of a little local celebrity couple. So that was kind of fun. This went on for quite a while, and then eventually after we got married, fewer people were listening to the radio stations, kind of like fewer people were reading the newspaper, I guess. And her health got worse, and she had a lot of health problems before she finally died. So we had our ups and downs over the years, but who would have thought that I would have had something like that in my lifetime? It was really something. Well, when I first came back to the Gazette, at least one of our county supervisors could neither read nor write. You know, you don't see something like that much anymore. That's changed a lot. Our justice court judges, some of them could neither read nor write, and they dispensed justice as they deemed fit. There were no real rules or regulations. They kind of just held court and did what they wanted to do. So the political part of the county is much more organized and progressive. Of course, then we still had the beat system, and supervisors were much more able to do favors for friends, basically. You know, you needed your driveway rocked, or you needed a culvert. Well, they could kind of do that and get away with it. And maybe still can, I don't know, but they certainly could then. So it was, again, more of a who you knew and that sort of thing. Of course, eventually, people overwhelmingly voted for the unit system of government. I think it was like 80 or 90% in favor of it, in which case the 4 or the 5 districts are not run separately. They were supposedly run as a unit with an administrator, and everybody got equal treatment. I'm sure it's not entirely equal, but that's changed over the years.
What do you think would happen if you weren't there at those meetings? Recording it, witnessing it.
Well, the meetings before the meetings still exist, even today. So, I think, I think being there made a difference, certainly. I think so. But it's still, in a small town, you kind of wonder, okay, how far do I push without burning bridges? And what is the greater good? Is the greater good to go for the throat, to push it to the limit, and then kind of lose communication in the future, or tolerate some things that maybe you shouldn't tolerate to keep the flow going? That's kind of vague, I know. Mississippi has the weakest open meetings law, I think, in the country, and nobody pays any attention to it anyway. People just don't. The meetings don't. And when people used to say, well, we're going to go into executive session. Fine. Well, we're just going to go into executive session. You don't know what they did unless they tell you. Finally, I think we pushed enough over the years. They do follow the procedure. They will vote to close the meeting to consider executive session. They will go into executive session. They will come out of executive session to take a vote, which is some progress, but you still don't know what they talked about in there. And I know they talk about things other than the reason they went into executive session. Obviously, they do. The Board of Supervisors, they used to meet on the side of the road and decide major things. They still do a little bit. Mostly now they do it over cell phones. The board meets 10 o'clock on the first Monday and usually the third Monday of every month. But before they meet. And they talk about things. Obviously, they talk about things. It's not a legal meeting, but they talk about things. And then they come over. And the meetings are fairly short and sweet. And they do deal with issues. And they do make decisions. But a lot of the background stuff is background stuff still. The aldermen, not so much. The aldermen do talk among themselves, but they tend to be more perceived as they meet and work one day a month. Supervisors of necessity are on the job all the time, every day. The aldermen, not so much again. They just kind of hit it one day at a time for each meeting. Of course, the supervisors have to deal with their budgets 80 pages long. The city's budget's like 10 pages long. So there's much, much more to deal with. People don't realize what the supervisors are responsible for. They have a huge, huge, huge list of responsibilities, duties. that theoretically they're supposed to be taken care of. Most of this now falls to the county administrator, who used to work for the audit department, and he takes care of a lot of the financial details and the background things. So he does serve that function. And they do concentrate more on the roads and bridges, which is what most people think of, rather than all the financial aspects of it. I get frustrated a bit sometimes because people don't care. They're not interested. You say, well, what about this? What about this? Oh, no, we elect them so they have to worry about it. We don't want to worry about it. We don't want to know. But you know, your tax dollars, they're deciding what's going to be done with all your tax dollars. You really need to be interested. And that's what we tried to push more, I think, in the paper, is awareness of, hey, you need to pay attention to your government. It kind of affects what your life is like. People don't see it that way, I think, sometimes. 20, 30 years ago, if you had a newspaper, you opened the door, the money came in. It was that simple. There was no competition. You know, nobody spent money, or very few people spent money on advertising on TV, so it's mostly newspaper advertising. We had several large grocery stores. We had Gibson's, we had Walmart, we had Fred's, we had some sporting stores. So the Gazette would have 7, 8, 10, 12 full-page ads in an issue, and a lot of other advertising. A lot of money coming in, and just didn't require any effort. Well, boy, those days are long gone now. It's changed so much. Particularly at the intersection of Highway 15 and Bankhead, where the convenience store used to be, where Subway is now. That whole area was a big parking lot. And at 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, that parking lot would be full of cars with people waiting on the Gazette to come out so they could get their copy, just to read what was in it, and partly because of grocery ads, because grocery ads were a big thing then. And most of these people subscribed to it. They were going to get a copy in the mail anyway, but they wanted to get the paper as soon as it came out. Again, not the case anymore, but that was the case then for sure. So,
what was the urgency? What was that all about? If they had a subscription,
they just wanted to be the first to see it for some reason, to see what was in it. And again, the publication date was pretty much determined by the major grocery store sales, which were usually on the weekend, on Friday, Thursday and Friday.
Was it so you could compare and
say,
I'm
coupons,
going to go buy my meat here and my bread here?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, the sale prices and specials and so forth. Yeah. And really, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that was the case. It was that popular at that time.
There was no gossip column?
Well, community news. We used to have maybe 15 community correspondents or so. Now we have really one. 2. We have 2. I guess I should say 2. And many of the communities don't really exist anymore. Not at the time, in those days, the communities still had their own identities. People didn't come to town as much. The roads were not as good, even though it was not that long ago. So people stayed at home much of the time, and the communities like Concord or Locust Grove or wherever had their own cohesiveness. They just stayed together, they knew each other. And so we would have a correspondent who just sent the news in from each one of those communities, who got married, who got sick, who visited who on Sunday afternoon, who had a chicken dinner. Always a good time was had by all, no matter what. That was always in there. And there was one little old lady, and I can't even think of her name. She probably didn't weigh 80 pounds. She was forever raising money for a trip to the Holy Land. And I think before she died, she finally got a trip to the Holy Land. But that she did that for years and years and years, trying to raise money through her gossip column. We have hurricane news from Susan Hooker. Susan's a retired teacher. And it's too long, but it's full of history. It's full of history from the hurricane community and full of family relationships. So it's interesting to read from that standpoint. The only other one we have is from the Macedonia community in northwest Union County. All the rest of them have gone. The people who did them have died. And nobody else has wanted to undertake it. I wish we still had all of them, or at least more, but we don't. Camille Landing writes basically a religious column. And she's been doing it for 50 years. I don't see how she comes up with something every year. Every week she does. We hardly ever have letters to the editor. We used to have people more interested in expressing opinions than they do. And it's almost unheard of. I wrote something this week that may or may not get some interest because it's griping about the sign ordinance. We'll see, I don't know. But again, people will say anything, no matter whether they should say it or not, on social media, but they don't want to express themselves in print for some reason. And I don't understand how they see the distinction, but for some reason they do. Maybe it's the permanence which the paper has. That's one thing. We talked to some of these high school kids. Where do you get your news? Instagram. Well, you don't get news from Instagram, but that's what they're doing. But we argue that the paper has a responsibility to be accurate. It's permanent. It usually provides much more information than social media does. And it's pretty much going to be around forever. I mean, you can go back now and look up something that happened 50 years ago without too much trouble. Can you do that with the internet? Maybe, but maybe not. People, I don't think, see that distinction either. So I think, maybe newspapers will last for a while yet. I hope so. I hope they'll make something of a comeback. The Gazette's actually growing a little bit, we are told. Not a lot, but it's growing rather than shrinking. So that's something to be a little bit proud of, I think. The Gazette, for the most part, too, is local news rather than filler or wire service stories. Occasionally we'll have to put something in that's not quite 100% Union County, but mostly it's Union County news, Union County people, or directly related to Union County. And it has more in it than most of the other, I'm starting to brag. It has much more news in it than the surrounding town's newspapers do. So, I'm getting old. I'm feeling old. I don't want to quit, but I feel like I need to cut back. I feel like my time is running out, and I've given too much to the newspaper. I've given my life 7 days a week to the newspaper, and don't have any other life. And it might be nice to have another life before this one's totally gone. That's maybe a hope and dream. I've got all these wonderful toys at home that I don't have time to use. All sorts of gimmicks and devices and things that I've accumulated. And they're sitting there collecting dust because last night I got home at 9 o'clock. That's not unusual. So I just don't have a lot of free time, and when I do, I'm getting old enough that I'll sit in my chair and I will fall asleep. My wife died about 8 years ago now. It doesn't seem like it. So I am alone, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. And if I were not alone, I probably would have a little more incentive to get out and do, well, not probably, I would definitely have more incentive to get out and do things than I do now, and maybe live my life a little bit more actively than I do, or maybe travel some more. Will that ever change? Man, who knows? Like I say, I'm getting real old, so it's hard to tell.
How old are you?
79.
79.
Yep.
Yeah.
Never had a journalism class in my life, of course.
Did you graduate from any of those schools you attended?
Yeah, I graduated from 2 or 3 of them. I graduated from all but one. Yeah, I got a master's degree in a couple of things, yeah. So, useless, but I've got one. So, or very nearly useless, I guess.
Well, they built the person that you are today. Yeah, well, that was great. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, I hope I didn't disappoint.
I've been looking
I
forward.
feel like I did.
No, you did not. No.
I feel like it.
No. I mean, I'm sure that there's lots of stories you could tell that probably you wouldn't even want to tell, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of ugly and funny and scandalous things happen.
Well, like one night, I was coming from the hospital and found an alligator in the street out by the hospital, which was kind of interesting, I guess.
I guess you left it alone.
I left it alone, but it wasn't left alone. This was like late at night, and it was in summer. My aunt had been in the hospital, and it was fairly late, and I was coming down the hill, about to turn right back on Bankhead back toward town. Well, alligator about this long was sitting in the road there. I guess it was just warming itself on the street. Well, I didn't stop, but I thought, aha. I thought, first of all, I'm going to call the cops and see if we can get to do something about the alligator and get my camera, which I didn't have with me. So I went home. The cops accused me of being drunk, paid no attention to me at all at first. But I got the camera, and by the time I came back out there, a crowd had gathered, and the alligator had gotten in the drainage ditch. And I got a picture of it. There's a picture in the paper somewhere. About all you can see is the eyes, the thing. And so it was like a drunken redneck circus of what we're going to do about the alligator, trying to catch it or not. And I don't know what happened. I was told that a wildlife person of some sort, I think, eventually caught it and took it, downstream and released it somewhere. But I don't know. I had a guy, and I can't even think of his name, who decided that he had seen Bigfoot in Benton County when he was younger. And he was, not well educated and grizzly and had a beard. So he decided he was going to make a song about it, about Bigfoot. And he recorded the song about Bigfoot on a CD and stayed after me for, I guess, a year trying to get it publicized so he could get somebody to pick it up for a big record company or on TV or something else. So somewhere I've got that CD about the Bigfoot song somewhere at home. And that was strange. I had a little old lady who had a screenplay she'd written about Paul Rainey, and it probably had some good ideas behind it, but she wouldn't listen to criticism from anybody, and she called me all day, all night, for months and months and months, trying to get me to help her with the film commission or with somebody I knew or something else. And it wasn't particularly humorous, but it was just one of these things that happened. People used to call me up at 3 o'clock. Hey, I killed this big snake. 3 a.m. I just got this big snake. You want to come take a picture of it? That happened in the early days, not so much lately, but that happened in the earlier days about that. And of course, we always had our giant watermelons for years and years and years. They'd bring in their big pumpkins or their watermelons or their gourds or their tomatoes or whatever to get their picture made. I don't know. Of course, we used to put the divorces and marriages and births and all that in the paper. Of course, the radio station used to broadcast the hospital list every day on the radio and put in who the patients were and how they were doing. And when we did that at one time too, we put the hospital list in.
I guess the community news covered a lot of that too.
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. And again, we had, I can't even remember, we had New Harmony, we had Center, we had, all the communities pretty much had them. And of course the papers were bigger and we had more room for them then too.
How would they submit their news back in the earlier times? They would type it up, or was it handwritten?
Most of it was handwritten. Some of it later was typed, but a lot of it was just handwritten pieces of paper. They'd bring it in and mail it in. Well, most of everything we got was handwritten for a long, long time. The Journal owns Ripley, and they combined Ashland into Ripley, so they own Ripley, New Albany, and Pontotoc. They used to have a paper in Houston, but it lost money forever, and they finally just got rid of it. They own Itawamba County in Fulton, and they own the Monroe County in Aberdeen. They briefly had a paper in Oxford, and they killed it, and I'm really not sure why. I think it was some arrangement they were doing with the Oxford Eagle. They owned the Mississippi Business Journal for a while, and they sold that to somebody. They used to have probably 200 people in that building down there, and now it's probably 40 or 50. It's just greatly, greatly reduced from what it used to be. So. Well, we're the historians of Union County. Nobody else is recording what goes on like we are, whether anybody reads it or not. We're preserving it. you know, and of course the museum will preserve what we're preserving, but still, yeah, we're the ones that are putting it in some sort of permanent form.
You're the
Well,
ones
anybody
who are
appreciates that or
writing
not.
it down.
Yeah.
And taking photos, putting it together.
Yeah. But mime is not pantomime. Mime is very precise, and it requires really good physical control, because you have to create a force, but you also have to create the resistance to that force, you know, without anything physically there. And so you have to be in pretty good shape. I mean, even if I could do it at all, it'd probably take at least 6 months worth of practice to be able to do it. So it's not something you just say, let's do it. It requires a lot of work, because you do have to be able to control your movement very, very well and very, very slowly. You know, I mean, some people say that you may not even remember or know who Marceau is. That may not mean anything to you. He was very, very, very popular. He was more of a pantomime. He was the guy that dressed all in white, had the little hat with the flower on it, and the mime makeup and the striped shirt and so forth. So I don't know. I don't know if mime would be popular or not. You know, we need a conference center. I think that's something that we could benefit from. There's enough to keep people busy here for a couple of days in terms of tourism, but if we could offer a conference center to get business groups and tour groups here as well as just tourism by itself, that would add, I think, a lot to the city. I'd love to see that. I don't know if they're advertising for this or not, but you used to see so many of these mom and pop bus tours come through New Albany from who knows where. But if they go see Frenchman's Grave, they see the museum, they see the Ingomar Mound, they do the trail, they do the park, you know, I mean, the literary heritage. There's enough stuff to do to keep people. Could go to the theater, they could see the William Faulkner documentary or the, you know, Mr. Faulkner, Do You Write or something. I mean, there's plenty here for people to do. So we could keep it here for a couple of days, and that would be revenue for the shops, for the restaurants, for the hotels, and then more people to come. That could be part of the development north of the railroad. Actually, there's a couple right down the street. The Coca-Cola plant's a fairly good sized building just by itself. I don't know if it's big enough or not. You know, we got the Magnolia Room, we got the community center, you got the museum, but that's that, and they're widely distributed. They're not close together. Again, the city owns some property scattered around town here and there, but the biggest chunk is, again, probably what the county owns out by the fairgrounds, which is a little bit isolated, but not that far from the interstate either. The school still owns over 200 acres on Samtown Barkley Drive. They're never going to do anything with. I don't guess they are. I don't know what they could do with it.